In the first substantive lecture for this module, I'll introduce the major theoretical perspectives that we can use to explore the relationship between the British state and the society that it governs. However, as a precursor to outlining the theories themselves, it will be useful to have an understanding of two things. Firstly, to understand what role theory plays in explanation in political science, and secondly, to have an awareness of some of the criteria by which we might evaluate theoretical frameworks. And that's what we'll look at in this brief online lecture. But first of all, it will be useful to think a little bit about what theory is and why we need it. Often in political science we just want to know the facts about a given political situation. For example, we might want to know how well the Conservative Party has performed in recent general elections in the north of England. A little research will soon allow us to discover this, and the answer is pretty poorly. However, we might want to move on from this and pose some further questions. Why has the Conservative electoral performance been so poor? Why has their performance been particularly poor in the last three general elections? And what could the Conservatives do to reverse their decline and stage an electoral revival? Once we turn to why and how questions, we begin to require theories that allow us to formulate explanations for why and how a certain state of affairs arises, is maintained and changes. And that is the first of my criteria about what a theory is. A theory, quite simply, is an explanation of something. Now, while there's nothing to stop us constructing a theory to explain a single specific event, generally theories provide an explanation for a class of phenomena. To return to our example, a theory explaining Conservative electoral performance will probably want to explain the outcome of several general elections and not just, for example, the 2005 one. In addition, it's usually argued that theories must be internally consistent, logically complete, and have implications for the empirical world. So theories should be internally consistent insofar as they should not contain statements which contradict. They should be logically complete insofar as the hypotheses which one deduces from the assumptions of a theory should follow logically. And they should also have falsifiable implications insofar as theories should be specific enough that it's clear what evidence is required to determine whether the evidence is consistent or inconsistent with the theory. So we need to be able to collect some data or conduct an experiment that will contradict the theory or confirm it. How then are we to decide amongst the various theoretical frameworks which to accept and which to work with? Now, there's no definitive agreement here, but among the criteria which are generally suggested are parsimony, accuracy, significance, postdictive and predictive capacity, explanatory scope, and hypothetical yield. Let's take each of those in turn. To be parsimonious is to be sparing or to be frugal, and to be theoretically parsimonious is necessary to forego unnecessary speculation and detail. Why is this important? Well, one of the roles of theory is to make understanding the social world simpler and more intelligible. And a theory encompassing hundreds of causal factors, while it may be highly accurate, is also likely to simply end up redescribing the social world rather than explaining it. Therefore, the principle of Occam's razor is often invoked when theories are assessed. William of Ockham was a Franciscan monk and philosopher in the 14th century who argued that when we have two competing theories that make exactly the same predictions, the one that is simpler is the better one. Quite simply, Occam's razor helps us shave off those concepts, variables or constructs which are not necessary to explain the phenomenon. While parsimony is a great virtue in a theory, it also needs to be balanced against other virtues. And if a theory is too simple, it may lose accuracy. If we simplify too much, we may lose crucial details and the theory may no longer aid us in finding our way around the social world. In this respect, theory is like a map of Newcastle which includes the River Tyne and landmarks such as the University and Gray's Monument, but which leaves out the main roads and metro lines, might be compact, but it wouldn't help us moving around the different parts of the city. Theory should also try to be significant. To be significant, a theory must be of interest. It is of little use to create maps of places that no one ever visits, wants to visit, or ever will visit. We must direct our theoretical concern to interesting and important things. In this respect, we must guard against theories which are tautologious. The problem with a tautological theory is that it simply redefines. It doesn't interpret, describe, explain, or predict. Secondly, we must avoid theories that are trite. We must try and build theories which state something which is not obvious. Theories should be enlightening and not banal. For some, the social sciences should try and follow the natural sciences like physics or chemistry. Experimentation in chemistry, for example, allows us to predict what will happen when we drop sodium into water. If anybody's curious, it explodes, and you can find lots of videos on YouTube of people dropping into sodium into water and finding exactly that. Now, there have been attempts in the social sciences to develop theories which have that same predictive and explanatory power. For example, Robert Michels developed the iron law of oligarchy. He argues that in all societies a minority will exercise power over the majority. But Michels and people like him are probably in the minority. Most people in the social sciences emphasize the predictive capacity of a theory, that is, its ability to explain past events. They use theories to generate causal hypotheses and expectations about the causal relationships amongst variables, and they're tested by treating them as postdictions, by comparing them against relevant evidence. When we find that that evidence is consistent with the hypothesis, then the theory is considered useful for explaining the phenomenon under investigation. A final set of criteria is explanatory scope and hypothetical yield. And here we're focusing really on the generality of the theory. In other words, how many different kinds of phenomena can the theory account for? Most social scientists would agree that a theory which is more general than another theory is to be preferred because it will be applicable to a wider range of individual events, people and situations. Similarly, if two theories are both able to generate the same hypotheses, then we should prefer the theory which goes on to generate more hypotheses beyond the issue in question. This is important because if a theory generates new hypotheses, it then has the potential to provide insights that were not obvious prior to stating the theory, thereby potentially creating new knowledge and, in addition, new possibilities for testing the theory. So, to conclude, a theory is an explanation, usually of a class of phenomenon rather than a specific event. It usually specifies causal relations amongst different concepts. Theories are generally internally consistent, logically complete, and have implications for the empirical world. When coming to judge theories, we have a variety of criteria. These include parsimony, accuracy, significance, predictive and postdictive capacity, and explanatory scope. If you've got any questions on what we've covered in this online lecture, please do bring them along to the first lecture and we'll have the opportunity to address them there and then. Thanks for listening.